Could you all please join me in saluting the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, for the record, please note that this meeting may be shown on the local cable broadcast by BCCA, and recorded for the internet. First item is our hearing of visitors, and we do have two people signed in. Jensen Denoise. Jensen, are you? Hi there. Come on up, sir. So with regard to hearing of visitors, the rules are that the public has 3 minutes approximately to present whatever issue they would like to present. The committee takes the matter under advisement. We don't get into a back and forth or a dialogue. And then if you would like to meet with any of us just after the meeting, approach us and we can talk in further detail. Okay? All right, the floor is yours, sir.
First and foremost, I just want to say thank you for Joyce Asak and Miss Judy Sullivan for having me here, inviting me here, and also want to congratulate them for their accomplishment last week with the election. My name is Jensen Denoise. I'm a college professor of Massasoit. I teach speech communications, and I also have an educational television show called Hero in You. Hero in You is an educational Hero in You. Hero in You is an educational show where we interview people in the community on a particular topic and theme, and then we connect it to a comic book issue. And I just want to briefly mention the features and the benefits. The goal, I would like to see if we can present the show to students at Brockton High. The features, we interview people in the community doing good work and good deeds, whether it's the mayor, like Bill Carpenter, or students or college students at Massasoit, or even NBA players from the Boston Celtics who are doing good deeds and good work on a particular topic and theme. And then we showcase it to the community to let them know that there are good ways to help them grow as individuals. And the features that we also show resources to the community, to the public, about the resources and the organizations that can help them out there. And the benefits, well, the benefits presenting it to the students of Brockton High is to show that by self-empowerment and self-improvement, they can do well and excel academically. Especially, we recently did an episode on sense of purpose, and we explain how students who have sense of purpose can excel academically because they are driven and motivated to excel with a reason. And my crew and I, we were interested in see if we can present this to the students sometime after Thanksgiving.
With you so that she can naturally review the material, and
Absolutely.
Then she will talk to the committee, and we will see what can be done, you know?
Understood.
We've always partnered certainly with our cable stations, and I appreciate getting the good word out, and we have so many students, teachers, staff members doing some really wonderful things. You'll even hear some things this evening. I hope you'll stick around and hear, you know, some of the stories.
Absolutely.
So I'm very happy to meet with you. Bring my communications director. Like I said, we, you know, certainly work with, you know, BCA, Brockton Cable Access.
Correct.
And happy to sit down and hear how you can showcase our good work happening in Brockton.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Okay, the next and final person on our list is our good friend and former school committee member, Ozzie Jordan. Good evening, Ozzie. How are you?
Good evening. Doing well. Glad to see all you folks, and see a couple of my past members still sitting here. Congratulations. Got a couple of pieces of information just want to share with you. Basically, a couple of suggestions. The first one is we spent, a few years ago, this is about money making for the school department. I'm sure you're all interested in this maybe. A few years back, we spent 2 summers and about a winter and a half meeting on Monday nights, a number of us, What came out of that was a strategic plan and a secondary plan also, which was about raising money for the school or as a whole, the school department, not just any one school, the whole system, by putting together a group who could go around and solicit from businesses, basically, not necessarily just in Brockton, and I'd say don't even start in Brockton because we're not large enough for the businesses we need. You go to Boston and see if we can get individuals to maybe either back a school or back the whole school department. You've got a number of companies that have come into Boston recently, like GE, even though they're having problems. They're going to be around. They're just switching what their products are, but they will be around. That's a good one. There are others that have come in, and they are the type of people that have the dollars. These are 500 Fortune, probably in the first 200, that could deal with here. One of the things I've always had a problem with, Boston is an island. Everybody goes to Boston. Boston's by itself. Then there's the rest of the state. We are part of that rest of the state. We've always reflected probably the best in the state of as far as what we do and what we reflect as individuals, as students, et cetera. We are an excellent place to try things out. So whatever things you can think of for money, which is almost everything that we're doing here in the school system, that's a good place to go. That's one. Number two, if I may, NCAS 2. I know you have, I'll call it a bye, for lack of a better term, using a sports term, as far as MCAS this year. My thought is, why not go to our dear friends in the State Department, see if you can get them to let you be a sample system for a couple of years. Split the NCAS testing to those that could just write the test the old way and those to take it electronically, showing that there is a major difference and that there is a problem between those who write and those who use the electronics. I know you've been through some of this, but this is something that I firmly believe very strong in, that sets up a barrier for a lot of our children trying to actually use the system and compose whatever they need to or pass the test on there. So those are my two big things. My last thing is just a statement, and this is not political, this is just straight. Star Spangled Banner. Most people don't know it has 4 verses. A lot of us never looked at the second, third, and fourth. I ask you, look at the third verse, and I'll leave it at that. I won't get into anything political. That's why maybe people are acting the way they are when it comes to the Star Spangled Banner. It's something we didn't learn in school. And I go way back, and more than any of you sitting here, as most of you know, we didn't learn all 4 verses. But when you read that third verse, think about what it's saying.
What's the second verse?
I don't even remember the second verse, to be honest with you. Yeah, but we didn't do the 4 verses. We just never did that. And that's when we went through all the verses of things back when I came through. Last thing, happy Thanksgiving to all of you and everybody sitting in the audience and everybody out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That goes over to Wanda. All right, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. At this point, any one of the school committee members can remove a particular item for review. Is there anyone that would like to remove a particular item? No? Okay. Seeing none, can someone make a motion to approve the consent agenda in its current form?
Motion to accept consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Communication, report of superintendent of schools.
Thank you. We always like to start with some good news, and we've been very fortunate to have the district that we have, and certainly many of our students. Before I introduce this next group, I will remind everybody, as we sit right now at a little bit past 7 on the 14th of November, our soccer team is taking part in, I believe it's the semifinals? South-sectional finals up at our own Marciano Stadium. So we're very proud. If anyone gets an opportunity, make sure you go up there and support our wonderful soccer team. And on that note, I'm very excited to welcome our wonderful cross-country team. I'm going to invite Coach John Fidalgo to come up and to share the microphone. And Coach, you also have some slides for us?
Sure, yeah.
So our cross-country team and many of our students are out in this audience. After we show them on our slides, I am going to invite every one of them to come up. Our coach is going to talk to us a little bit about what the season has meant. You are winners, I'm told, of the big three. Again, we're always excited. I know I see you out there practicing in the warm weather, in the cold weather that has started to come. You make us very, very proud. After we see this, I'd like to invite you, although we don't have a big space up here, I'd like to invite you all to come up, to be on camera, and let the Brockton community see what a terrific accomplishment this is for our students. So Coach, I'm going to let you take it away.
Sure. Thank you very much for having us. The first thing I want to do is a lot of times, because of the Brockton Track Club, a lot of times my name is associated with like a lot of the things track, but Coach Cliff Canavan, he's been the girls' head coach for 14 years. And I started out as the assistant to Cliff, and now that we have had a boys' coach opening, we combined the program. So we've been co-head coaches this year. And a lot of the things that have been happening for a long time because of Cliff. So I just want to make sure, he gets his due and his acknowledgement because I learned from him. But we're here tonight because of the kids, and they have been such a pleasure to coach this year because of the work they put in, because of how hard they work, and more importantly, what really drives us is how they're student athletes. And it's more than just running track for a lot of these kids. After track practice, they're in the choir doing harmonics. They're at the band on Friday nights playing at the football games. They're at JROTC presenting at the Veterans Assembly. Some of them are 4.5 GPA students. They're going on to be doctors. And we're just so proud of more than just what they do in cross country, but what they do in the classroom and in the community as well. I know that some of the letters that we've received this year have kind of acknowledged their character more than their running ability. And to us, that's really important because the character that they show when nobody's watching and when we're not watching them, obviously represents our school, our city, and our program really well. One athlete who's stood out this year has been Nicole Dunberry. So we have to acknowledge her. She's the first female athlete in cross country in 20 years to qualify for the All-State meet. So she's someone that's had an outstanding season, and her work ethic is just unmatched. And that goes to show tonight when she leaves here, she's going to piano lessons, and while she's still training for the biggest meet of her life, everything else is still going on outside of track.
One of the things I just wanted to add in, each year that I've been coaching the girls, at the end of the season, it also coincides with the end of the first term. So I always like to see, knowing how many hours they put into running with us, what they also do academically during that same time frame. And just to give you an idea of the caliber of athletes and students that we have, last year, our first term, which is during our cross-country season, the entire team average, every single person averaged together, was a 3.85. I'd love to compare that to any team in Brockton. I'm very, very proud of that fact because they are students first. When we flew out to Disney, and thank you all school committee members for approving that trip, it's a fantastic experience to get these kids an opportunity to not just compete at a national level, but just simply the idea of half of them flew for the first time on that trip. But my entire flight out, one of the students sitting next to me was working on academics the entire time. Had a study book out, working on, I think it was the PSAT test booklet. It speaks to the quality of character of all of the girls, and now that it's a combined program, boys, that we get the chance to work with. And we're looking forward to the next several seasons of continued growth and improvement. Thank you.
And Coach, thank you for recognizing Coach Canavan. Of course, I've worked with you for a long time. You've done great, even fundraising for these kids to make sure that the community continues to support them. We get a lovely note from them. I put it right in my office, front and center.
Just mailed them out today. You'll be getting
That's
your new
good.
pictures.
But those pictures are there, and it does mean a lot to us as a community. And you are correct. At a past school committee meeting, we actually read into correspondence that a letter was received from somebody, I believe, that saw you on the Cape, you know, and commented about what a great group of kids, and again, we know that. And when you hear so many negative things sometimes about being in a city or a city, you know, this is really what all of us know the city of Brockton stands for, in the City of Champions. Are there any other coaches that we haven't recognized?
Absolutely. We
All right,
have
please,
Coach
please.
Fay and Coach Cunningham. Both been fantastic additions new this year to the program, and we're looking forward to many more years making it stronger with all four of us.
Well, congratulations.
I know that Senator Brady wanted to be here this evening. He sent word, and he wants to congratulate everyone for their achievement. So if he could be here, he would have, he said. So.
And I do have to mention, when you mentioned Nicole Dunbury, her dad is a teacher in the Brockton Public Schools. So again, we're very proud. I know he's in the audience and represents so many of those proud parents that stand behind your children, make sure they get to piano lessons or whatever they're doing. You know, you certainly are such an important partner for us, and certainly the most important person to them. So when you have coaches and teachers that are mentors, when you have a community that supports our students and our student athletes and parents, you know, we can't fail. So, you know, thank you to everybody. So I'd love to have, can we get the team up here? And
We have about 15 to 20 out of the 80 that completed the season. So.
well, we can
They also wanted you to know that the slogan that track and cross country have taken on the last couple of years has been "No struggle, no progress," and I think it's something that the district can certainly understand and relate to, and obviously means a lot, you know, of different things to different people, but it's certainly something that you know, we wanted you to know that's what we do, and we know that that's what you're doing for us too, through the hard times and the good times. So.
Well, that is going to actually keep us going, because if struggle relates to progress, then we are going to be golden. So come on down, guys. Okay, can I invite our student representative, Shama Erase from Brockton High School, to give us an update on what's happening at the high school.
So, like you said, my name is Shami Race, just to reintroduce myself. I'm a senior at Brockton High School. So me being a senior, that means that I had to deal with all the senior stuff, like applying to colleges and choosing where to go to colleges and what to major in. And for myself, I plan to major in accounting or financing while following the pre-med track, because I plan on going to med school after college. And by this time, like, term one's done, so college applications are basically finished and ready to go in and ready to be sent. And that being said, this year is going by very quickly. A lot of people say that senior year is like the fastest year ever, and I didn't really believe them until this year started, and now Thanksgiving is like in a week. And I think that how quick it's going definitely applies to how busy this year is with the college and challenging courses like AP and IB courses and extracurriculars like sports and things. Like, I know a lot of my friends from that played fall sports are now transitioning into winter sports, and those are starting back up. So, and I know for myself, I don't play sports, but I do partake in clubs like Key Club, which is primarily about volunteering. So we've been helping out in the community, and we officially have a new advisor. So we'll be noticed. We'll continue to be seen as an official Key Club at Brockton from Key Club International, and continue to work with Kiwanis. Also in student council, we've been pretty involved. I don't know if you guys know about Halloween Hallway, but that took place again. That was pretty fun this year. And also in Upward Bound, I know a lot of seniors are getting help, and Upward Bound is kind of like Talent Search, where it prepares students for college that's going to come up. So I know for freshmen, they do tutoring. For sophomores, they help with MCAS, and then juniors and seniors, SATs, and seniors, college applications. So that's definitely been very helpful. And I've noticed while walking around the school that there's 8th graders coming around, like they're having tours, which seems like a very good idea, so they know what to expect, what to look forward to in the next year, and just to be prepared. And it's kind of fun to see them like wide-eyed and stuff when they see all the kids going around during class. So that's my update.
Do they look nervous to you?
A little bit.
I know, coming into the high school, I think, is a little bit overwhelming for any of us the
Yes,
first time when we
definitely.
see that. I also want to join in the conversation with Shama that our high school students, and again, it is almost Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and they are applying for, early acceptance into colleges, or starting to finish up their college tours. The
Yeah.
juniors, of course, are starting to begin those college tours, and all the things that make this such a wonderful year for you. I was not here, but I want to congratulate Brockton High School. Every year they do the Veterans Assembly. I know in talking to Deputy Superintendent Thomas, we're very proud of that offering to our community and in honor of our veterans. And we're going to continue to find ways to make sure that we invite the community in to see such a wonderful presentation and respectful tribute to all our veterans. So I want to thank them for everything they do, and thank our high school students for sponsoring that every year. I know you also took part in the parade. The weather, I'm sure, was a little bit chilly here, I hear, but we still have our students out there, our marching band, our JROTC is represented again, and thank you. And I do want to ask you, we also have school committee next week, but can you find out, I know we have a couple of things coming up in drama. So it gives us an opportunity to give those dates out to the community. I know early December is their first, and we have the
Yes.
Pops concert, so if you can get those dates for next Tuesday night, we'll be able to let the public know all of the important things coming up for the high school. So thank you very much.
Job in the parade on Saturday. And actually, Congressman Lynch was in town, and he he really gave a moving speech about the veterans who don't make it home. And it was very thoughtful, and you could see that it really had an impact on the crowd. It was an excellent speech. And I think, you know, all of our students were really taking it in and appreciating what Veterans Day really means. And I think it was one of the best speeches I've ever heard. The congressman speaks very well, and I think this was one of the best speeches I've ever heard him give. So kudos to the band and the JROTC and all of our students. They did a wonderful job.
And thank you to all of you who got out there on a cold day and marched. I heard you had a wonderful warm hat on.
Oh, I
And I heard one of
did.
your fellow school committee members has a picture of
They
it.
all made fun of me, but I was warm. That's all right. That's okay. I can take it.
So on another positive note, I'm going to ask our communications director, Michelle Bolton, one of the things that I talked to you about, and tonight we had the preparation in our subcommittee of the superintendent evaluation. And the reason I say that is we're going to be setting our new goals for the year for superintendent. And one of the things with all of the struggles that we're having is looking to certainly acknowledge the people that are out there doing the hard work each and every day. You heard me talk a little bit about this evening about the Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council that is taking place for the first time, you know, since I can remember. And it gives teachers a voice to share with us some of the challenges, the concerns, or things that they want to make sure that we hear. And by the same token, I want to be able to spread word so they go back into their schools and talk about some of the things that we're doing. But that being said, we actually started out the school year, and I know a number of you were with me on opening day. And it wasn't easy when we had close to 80 teachers not sitting in those seats, or all of the challenges that we had faced this summer just to get those doors open. And one of the things that we talked about was the Red Apple Award. You know, this is very heavy. You know, it is a desk paperweight. It's a beautiful marble stone. And we talked about all year long acknowledging teachers and employees that were really going above and beyond kind of the so-called call of duty. So we had our first awards I wanted to make sure we got it in for the month of October, so we'll try to have one every month. At the end of the year, we actually are going to have the Golden Apple Awards. So I wanted you to be able to see.
Oh, this is this.
Oh,
I was going, can you shut that light off? But I didn't realize you, okay, sorry.
do you need the light shut off, or you're?
Oh, no, I was talking about this. I didn't know you were broadcasting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and I know the feeling. So I do want to say, before you see this, I want to call out and I want to mention in our Red Apple Awards, we gave awards to close to, I believe, 20 teachers throughout the district. It was really interesting to see teachers with their parents there, some elderly parents that were thrilled to see their child get an award and to talk about some of those extra things that kids did. So we had Matt Bernstein from the Barrett Russell Early Education Center. We had Kathy Gormley from the Angelo School. We had Judy Meswera from the Arnone School, Jane Werb from the Baker School. We had Christy Scanlon from the Brookfield School. We had Jennifer Baker and Steve Alves from the Davis School. We had Deb Scott from the George School, Nicholas Robin from the Gilmore Elementary School, and we had Jen Vargas from the Raymond School, and we had John Fidalgo there representing Brockton High School. So we are encouraging nominations for our teachers and our staff members that go, or any of us that go above and beyond the call of duty, you know, to be a recipient of our next group of Red Apple Awards. So I believe we have some pictures here to show you. So let me step out of the way. And I'd like you to enjoy a little bit about the ceremony the other day. This was their invitation. What we were able to do was to read a little bit about each and every one of the teachers and what they were able to do. Judy Meswera, for instance, had another teacher who was going to be displaced, a newer teacher, stay in the class level that they were at, and Judy left, not because she had to on the seniority list, because she wanted to support the other teacher. This is Jane Werb from the Baker School. Christy Scanlon at the Brookfield. I'm not going to remember them all, I'm sure I'm not. This is Steve and Jen from the Davis, who I believe planted the landscape outside. So it isn't always just about teaching, it's about going that extra mile to be proud when the children are walking in to see, you know, the garden and the flowers, and they plan to do this all year long to keep up that area outside. I love that that Chartwell's put together as part of our refreshments, the red apples. And these were actually a big hit. People were very happy. Maybe we should do that for school committee as the red apples now. Healthy food. Deb Scott from the George School, School Adjustment Counselor. Nick Robbins, who actually, with the Gilmore, the previous Huntington, he heads up as treasurer of the PTA to make sure that those kids have, you know, after-school activities or field trips at the end of the year or fun activities.
And the Huntington Running Club, Gilmore Running Club.
Is that what he's doing?
Well, Brian McCarthy runs it with them too. He take kids out running.
I was going to say, I'm not even sure we had that on there. Jen Vargas, this is a great story. Jen is from the Raymond School. She and her whole family, they were looking for additional books for the library at the Raymond School for Students, and she put out something on a website that invited Easton parents. I believe she's in Easton. And she had over 900 books donated, some lightly used, some brand new. She leveled them. She put them in libraries for the classes. I met her husband and daughters, who she kept busy all summer with the donations that continuously come in. And she represents so many other teachers. That came up today about teachers out there looking for grants, looking for opportunities, and looking for ways to support the district. And of course, this is John, with his starting the club and really accentuating the need to, you know, to have the kids involved in healthy activities and really be a feeder program for some of our schools. And Jane Ferroli and Dr. Julian Andrade, again, I know, Michelle, you couldn't do it without them. It gives us a team when we don't have a team. You know, people come together and put together the invitation, make sure everything was set up, it was all decorated. You know, families were just thrilled, you know, to be there, you know, for their recipients of the Red Apple Award. Very good. So again, thank you to everybody that was involved. And to give you an update on the students enrolling from Puerto Rico, we're working with a number of other urban superintendents to look at our numbers. Ours are not as high as some districts that are in the hundreds. We have districts anywhere from 50 to 60. Our numbers are presently from Puerto Rico enrolling 13, from the U.S. Virgin Isles 6, and we have 18 coming from Florida, which is interesting because, you know, I'm not sure if it is because of the hurricane situation that they're relocating, but those are the numbers that we're keeping right now, and these are students that, you know, continue to come in. And remember, the most important thing for us was being able to support these youngsters. The bilingual department, I know, is holding a fundraiser for those families that are coming that have no winter coats, you know, no clothing. They're coming to stay with relatives, you know, up here in New England. So we continue to reach out those arms and support the students that we have and continue to work with DESE, because if you recall, back in 2010, when you did receive a large population of close to 200 youngsters from Haiti after the Haitian earthquake, there was no money that came in January, February, when you were bringing on additional teachers, classes. So I will give the state and the Department of Education credit. They are looking at these numbers, and they're looking at ways to support districts. Nothing has happened, and we'll continue to calculate our numbers. I also want to mention that we have an opportunity, and I have been contacted by a number of groups about the possibility of our students, especially where we have the Chinese language program, about opportunities for exchange for our students, our teachers. So when I went to my South Shore Superintendent Roundtable, they talked about an opportunity from an organization called Primary Source. And what they're doing during April vacation is they are putting together a trip for teachers, for administrators and leaders to actually go to China It's an education delegation to China. It's April 12th through the 22nd. That is April vacation. And I am looking to send Rachel Umbriana, who is our department head of foreign language up at the high school. She has been working with researching, again, exchange programs, and I'm going to be sending her on this trip. The cost is about $2,500. We actually have some money in the superintendent's account. As Tom said, we put a little bit of money away a few years ago from the raise. There is still a little bit of money in that account, and I'm looking to send Rachel on this trip to China to really start to take a look at before we decide whether we're going to send students over there on one of these programs. So I'll have her come before us as we start to get, I'm just right now having her fill out the application, to be able to do this. Any questions on that, or? No? Okay, yep. The next item is, sorry, let me get my things here, is I want to ask Dr. Ethan Cancel to come up and to share with us. Again, you heard Ozzie Jordan, and I think it's interesting when Ozzie talks about the possibility of, and he brings to your attention that when you take a test online versus a paper and pencil test that our students have been comfortable with for a lot of years. And if you recall, our 8th graders all last year, and there was pressure from the state, and we felt that we had an opportunity. There were some districts, again, in different levels that did not have students doing the online testing. We chose to have all our 8th graders do the sample online testing for the MCAS 2.0. But Ozzie brings up a good point when you talk about the difference in scores between paper and pencil versus online, although that's not going to stop us from moving forward. So I'm going to sit with Dr. Cancel. We are going to provide you with some of the results from the present information that we got back. Remember, this is a baseline year for grades 3 through 8. Our high school, it is the MCAS test that we've been taking for a long time, not the next generation. So I'm going to have Dr. Cancel present, and then we can have a discussion.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here, especially when there's a soccer game that people really want to go see. But I timed it. It only takes an hour and a half, so you can read it now. It's 16 minutes. It wasn't very good. I have some other jokes, and they're not very good either. So the big question is, how did BPS do? That's always the question. And I always say, well, you start with your history, compare how you did in the past. Well, there is no test score history, so that one was actually very easy for me. It's nice to compare to the state, see how you do compared to the state averages. It's good within the district to see how you do compared to the other schools. So the principals really appreciate this one. But then I always remind them it's important to look outside of the district at the comparable other large urbans. So we have our comparable districts as well. So that's the organization, that's the fancy transition. And here we go. A lot of this is review. This is the third presentation, but we want to remind everyone that with this test, MCAS 2.0, you cannot compare to the past. And we have these fancy charts that show the legacy MCAS, and we see that it still is given in 10th grade and science. It's a 200 to 280 point scale. We see that there was warning, needs improvement, proficient, and advanced performance levels. The next generation, not only does it test different standards, which is important, it's different content, but it's also on this new scale. So you have 120 points instead of 80 points. There are 30-point increments in between. And meeting expectations is not the same as proficient. I know this is review. It's the third time you've heard it, but it's so tempting to look at previous years. You really can't do it. It is comparing apples to oranges. So on to the next one, answering the question, how did BPS do compared to the state? The new scales are really nice. They enable cross-grade comparison. That's a big enhancement. For the first time, you're able to look at a third grade score and a fifth grade score, and you're able to get some comparability. In the past, those standard setting committees met at different times. They had different cut scores, so they really weren't that useful. Now you can look across the different grades. There is a problem. Across the state, not everyone took the test in the same mode. So some people took it online, some people did not take it online. That's a big deal because we're seeing in this district, and I'm asking other districts as well, and they're saying the same thing. It does make a difference. There's one caveat that I have to add to that. It may make a difference, but the bottom line is the state is saying your graduation requirement is going to be online. Not this year, but the next year. So that's the new age. That's what we're in. That's the game we're playing. To use an analogy with cross country, if we happen to have a hilly course and you're a good flat runner, too bad. Better learn to run hills if you are on a hilly course. We're going to be taking the test online, so that is the way it is. So I do want to just remind people of that. Okay, so you've seen this slide before. What it does is it compares us for ELA, the scaled scores for all the different grades. On the far right is the combined 3 through 8. You see the state average up above, and you see the difference in between. And one of the things you see is there's not a huge amount of difference in terms of the year-to-year difference. You do see 7th grade has the smallest gap with the state, and you see that 3rd grade has the largest gap with the state. You see that it's all about, it all averages out to 12.2 point difference. 500, I want to point out again, is that magic line of meeting expectations. And meeting expectations for the first time really means you're meeting those grade level expectations. That's the state new definition. That's different from proficient. So that's where we are on average. I have to tell you, I've been looking at it, spending some time. We have a wide dispersion of scores. The distribution of scores, you're going to have kids scoring perfect scores on this incredibly hard test. I was amazed. I didn't think there'd be any perfect scores. We have kids scoring perfect scores, we have kids scoring really low scores, and we have kids in the middle. So that's going to be a real challenge for all our teachers because we've got a very wide gap between the different scores. Here we are in math. It's colored blue. And you can see that the gap is slightly larger with the state. You see that the thing that I pointed out earlier is 8th grade is the highest gap we have. All of our 8th graders took the test online. Does it make a difference? I think it does make a difference. We have a history because schools like the Raymond, the Hancock, the Downey, the Asheville, they've been doing this for a long time. And we saw that when schools started out online, they really didn't do very well. They struggled. And then over time, they got better. In some cases, it wasn't 1 year. It was over time. Huntington was another school. They've been doing it for a long time. So it's important to remember that all of our 8th graders did it. Across the state, grade 4 and grade 8 did it online. But there were waivers. We had that waiver. We happened to choose everything online for 8th grade, and then we had whole schools go online. But, so that's, oops, I'm sorry about that. Hit one too many. This is the student growth percentile. It's always worth talking about the student growth percentile. The student growth percentile is a magical kind of metric. And what it purports to do is it says no matter what test you took, it takes a look at people with a similar score history. And they put people with a similar score history in an academic peer group. And then they see how did those peers do this year on the test. And they rank order how those peers did this year on the test, and that's how you get your percentile. This is the median, the middle percentile. And the state says that a 50 is good. In fact, they say anything between 40 and 60 is good. What's important to remember about the student growth percentile, we act as if there's a difference between a 48 and a 50, and everyone knows 50 is better than 48, but the truth is, they're really the same. In order for them to be able to make these kinds of claims across any kind of test, you give up precision. And so is there really a difference between a 46 and a 50? I don't think there's a meaningful difference. It's just as likely that that 46 is a 51 as it is a 41. So there's a margin of error built into this. So when you say, oh geez, what happened to grade 8? I will tell you grade 8 did do the test online. Is a 39 something to jump up and down about? Well, not jump up and down and cheer, but it's also not something to jump up and down about that it's terrible. It's a brand new test, and this is not a very precise measure. So here we are with the math scores, and you see that these are lower at grades 6, 7, and 8. So there's that 8th grade theme again. It's lower. It was the online grade. Could it possibly be higher than that, and could this be error? Yes, it is possible. It really is. Don't forget, it's especially hard because we had schools taking PARCC. The year before that, some schools took PARCC, and a lot of schools took MCAS. And the year before that, everyone took MCAS. So in terms of your academic peer group, history goes best. The more student growth percentiles are better the more history you have. When you have so many different tests, it's hard to really say that there's a strong history, which is why the state is waiving their accountability this year. They know that it's not really ready for prime time. So the last presentation we did, it was that baseball theme. You know, it's a baseline year. It's a whole new ball game. It is. And this is not the year to make any grand sweeping conclusions from the data. The data are, at best, choppy. The data are unreliable. We're just not sure what it's going to mean. It gives us some indications if we can back it up and confirm it with our own district data, on our STAR testing, on our district benchmarks. That's another story. But these are what they are, and they're no more than that. But we do see there's concern in math at the middle grade level, and you can see what the gaps are. All right. So now we transition back to how did BPS do. So we look within the district, and I want to remind everyone, not everyone in Brockton took the test online. There are differences in schools. Some took them paper and pencil. Some schools took them online for the first time. Some schools took them online in 8th grade only. Some schools have been doing this for a long time.
And can I also, when you look at that, one of the things we had to do when we talked about devices is we made decisions strategically because not all schools had devices. So if you go back about 4 years ago when we had the first opportunity, you know, it was probably sometime in December. We were able to get devices. I believe it was at the Raymond School and the Hancock School. Those were our first 2 elementary schools, and very much on a trial basis. So it wasn't that we were a district that had one-to-one devices and could deploy these throughout the district and start to teach to a test that was clearly just being developed. So I just want to keep that in mind as we look at schools. And we've been looking at this. It's been very hard when I sat with other district administrators, and there were choices that districts made as far as, do you want to do, when you had an opportunity, a test online or paper and pencil. We were clearly, and I'm going to use the Ashfield as an example, always #1 in many of your middle schools. It's a small middle school, again, had excellent achievement and growth, and they were one, and I credit that principal for saying, I want to try, and this is probably 3 years ago, I want to try the online testing, bring the devices into the Ashfield. We clearly saw those scores drop. And the state never really acknowledged that. And again, we were being held harmless. We would do it again the same way by making sure our schools had an opportunity, especially with being held harmless, which has clearly implications for a principal overseeing a school. So there's been a lot of steps along the way to get to where we are right now.
In terms of the elementary schools, this is a complicated chart. You have the median student growth percentile for English on the bottom. You have the percent of students meeting or exceeding expectations running up and down. And so you see basically a cluster of schools. Everyone's doing not remarkably different from each other. These three schools stand out to me, the Angelo, the Kennedy, and the Hancock, in that they are our highest achieving schools, in the sense that they have the highest percentage of students who are meeting or exceeding expectations. What's different about the Angelo, the Kennedy, and the Hancock is the Angelo's student growth percentile is a little bit below 40, whereas the Kennedy is above 50, which is a good thing, and the Hancock is a bit above 50. In fact, the Hancock had a particular grade that was unusually high. However, Hancock has been doing online for a while. It was a very good year in English. Could it be, the error that went in their favor? Sure, it could be. That score could just as easily be 5 or 7 points lower than it is. In reality, it just is error that's making it. However, that's what you have. The scales are a little tricky because it does go 0 to 100 on both scales, but if you wanted to see the differences between schools, I'd have to exaggerate the differences, and they're really not huge differences. That's what, if you just kind of step back from the slide, you say, you know what, everyone's sort of in a clump. That's the technical, everyone's in a clump, so.
I think the other thing to bring to your attention, again, when you look at many of our students, especially starting out, when you look at your SEI strands, you can clearly look at the Arnone, you can look at the Brookfield, you can look at the Raymond, the Huntington, the large percentage of, again, English language learners. I mean, clearly you can see. And when we always look, by the time they get to the 10th grade, we're pleased with the progress, especially for those students that remain with us, from elementary, through the high school.
For instance, the Angelo School, which is pretty high, well, we have our talented and gifted program in the Angelo School.
Huge
So
impact.
how much does that, it does, okay.
Huge impact. So as the superintendent was saying, if you happen to have a large SEI strand, so you have a large number of English language learners, your score in English, not surprisingly, is going to be low. That happens. It matters a lot, and one of the things that we've been trying to do for schools is we've been trying to disaggregate the data and say, here's your group of English language learners, here's your group of non-English language learners. And so you can, here are your students with disabilities, here are your students without disabilities. And so you can really look at that level, and we've been doing that with the different schools, so they get a sense of where they are. The other reason why I do a slide like this is it shows not just who's got the highest achieving students, but the reason I made such a big deal about the Hancock is their percentage is high in terms, relatively speaking. They're among the highest in terms of meeting or exceeding expectations. But what's great about this score is they're also really high on the growth. And so they get special kudos for this. So then you look at the elementary math, and I wanted to call out these three schools. Angelo again, and you're right, they have the talented and gifted program, so you would expect them to have the highest percentage of students meeting and exceeding expectations. The Huntington, though, had very high growth. In math, you have a less of an impact of English. So if you have plenty of English language learners, you see that the Huntington and the Raymond both did a real nice job in growth. That means wherever their students started, they took them a long way.
And can I also say, when I was at the MASS conference and Jeff Wilson, the acting commissioner, spoke, one of the things that was interesting that he spoke about was looking at the time that students are spending with your extended learning time schools. And he talked about students needing additional time, to certainly meet certain benchmarks. And I think clearly when you look at the Huntington, when you talk about the strand of students that come from a very poor neighborhood, low socioeconomic, weed and seed area, all of those things that we look at, and that extended learning time, which has been at that school since I think 2012, has clearly made a difference in the sustained learning time that the students are using, and they continue to really defy their demographics. So it isn't rocket science when you talk about when we've had programs in the summer, and again, we've watched those grants dry up. We're not even touching on the percentage of kids that we used to have for an additional 20 days in the summer. We've continued to keep some of those programs afloat, but that clearly makes a difference for the students' learning.
I agree wholeheartedly. Here are the middle schools in terms of, it's the same chart. This is the English language arts chart. And you can see that Plouffe had the highest in terms of percentage meeting or exceeding expectations. North had the highest growth. They're pretty similar in terms of where they are. There's one school, South, which is a little bit low on the growth side. South, I will point out, was a school that did 100% online. It was their first year. So does that mean that South has a terrible performance here? I don't think so. I think it shows that that was the first year that they tried it online. Here's the math. You can see Ashfield. And I agree with the superintendent. I'm really impressed by the courage that some of the principals and the superintendent has had, because I'm this accountability guy saying a couple years ago, if you go online, you're running this risk of your scores going down. We've seen it. It's an implementation dip, and the accountability isn't stopping. And yet, the superintendent's always clear. What's best for the kids? If we had the money, we would have given one-to-one devices and had every school doing online as soon as we could. We just didn't have the resources to support that. But the Ashfield, as you see there, they're doing a great job in terms of growth, and they're one of the highest performing schools. I will point out, once again, South, they were the only school that did 100% online. And across the state, it's not just in Brockton, across the state, the percentage of students who are meeting expectations is way, way down compared to the percentage of students who are proficient or advanced. They're different measures. It's a much harder measure. It's a more difficult test. So that isn't surprising. The good thing is over 50% of our kids are in the partial meeting expectations level. That was on the last presentation we did. So that means that all you have to do is move that one group of kids. You move them up, and all of a sudden your percentages look a whole lot better. So it's very similar to what happened back in the day with MCAS, and we'll see what happens going forward. All right, so we've taken a look at that. How did I do? Comparable districts. I want to remind everyone, not everyone took the test online. Here are the grades 3 through 8 scaled scores. These are our most comparable districts. We've got Lowell, Lynn, Fall River, Worcester, Boston, New Bedford, Springfield, Lawrence, and Brockton. It's impossible to find a district that looks exactly like Brockton. Our demographics are simply different. But we do have, these are the most comparable districts. We've been looking at them, comparing how we're doing compared to them for a long time. I do want to point out there's not a huge difference. I'd say between 2 and 3 points. That's, you're pretty much doing the same. So if you look at from where Brockton is to Boston, that's virtually the same performance. But at the end of the day, bottom line is Brockton's average scaled score grades 3 through 8 is where it is. Now we have the student growth percentile. It almost doesn't matter how you rank in the student growth percentile. What matters is, are you between 40 and 60? 46 is definitely between 40 and 60. It's pretty close to 50. It's decent. We've had years that have been higher. We've had some years that have been lower, but to me, this is a decent, not a great, but this is a decent year in terms of growth. If you're doing decently in terms of growth, it means you're taking your students from where they start and you're moving them along. Again, these are grades 3 through 8. We have a high school, very quick high school presentation that's sort of at the end of this. Here's the math, very similar. You do start to see a little more spread between the bottom and the top, but so there is a substantive difference between 485.4 and 492. That's qualitatively different.
While you're looking at that slide, and this is not to take away from the very hard work that we have going forward, but I will tell you, and you know that I'm with my urban superintendent counterparts. We're constantly having conversations about the struggles. It has been very difficult when you talk about the economically disadvantaged and those communities that suffered some of the losses that Brockton did, which has clearly impacted our class size, has impacted, and you'll hear me talk about this. But I find it interesting that both Deputy Superintendent Thomas and I were having conversation with the superintendent from Lowell, and the conversation this summer was, I have $4 million extra that I'm looking to, basically support the district with, and that's a very different conversation that a district looking at a $16 million deficit. So as much as these are comparable districts, and we don't make excuses, we have a lot of work to do, and that is a baseline year for us. There are differences. As I look up there at the winners and the losers, and both, Aldo Petronio and I will tell you, and it made no rhyme or reason when 2 years ago we lost $6 million and Springfield gained $12 million. So, we're in competition with comparable districts, but at the same time, sometimes it's apples and oranges.
Yep. Okay, so the student growth percentile, it's a little bit lower than in the ELA. It's in that 40 to 60 range, so that's, where we are. Here's the grade 10. This is, to me, still the really positive story. Is there a difference between 93.5 and 93.1 or 93? No, it isn't. But the bottom line is Brockton's been #1 in ELA for a very, very long time. Okay, so that's a very good slide. This isn't the high school, this is the entire district. And after a while, you sort of reach a ceiling effect. There's only so many kids who are going to score proficient or advanced. You don't get any bonuses for scoring advanced. This is for an urban district. Basically, you see, it's as good as it gets.
And it also speaks to the work that you have done when you talk about our alternative pathways, because although 93.5, the largest percentage, are our Brockton High students that we're so very proud of, this is also when you go and you look at that graduation field and you have students from the Goddard, now the Huntington Therapeutic Day School, when you have students from Frederick Douglass Academy, from Champion High School, from the Champion City School, and they are receiving diplomas, and that does account for taking, and this of course is the previous MCAS test, the legacy MCAS test that they've taken.
And then in the math, we see that it's slightly lower. And so we've seen that the middle school math and the high school math is lagging what we've done in the past. The student growth percentile, 51 for grade 10, that's really solid. In math, the 35 is not really solid, and that's cause for concern. It's the legacy test, so it's not that we have the new test. So this is something that we obviously are looking at very closely. I will point out, before people really leap to any conclusions, this is a student growth percentile which is taking a look way back when the kids were in 8th grade. In 8th grade, there was a mix of PARCC and MCAS. So it's to me, and to the people at the state who make up the tests, grade 10 student growth has always been sketchy because you're going back in time to 8th grade, which is always, there's a lot of changes between 8th and 10th grade. So this is something that's unusually difficult because you have these transitions of PARCC, MCAS, and you're skipping a year as well. That said, it still is concerning, so we need to take a look at it. Okay, here's the science. You see we're sort of in the middle of the pack. Our high school science is a lot stronger than our grades 5 and 8 science. Our grades 5 and 8 science have been pretty much flat. We've seen that. The challenge is ahead. This is a slide that I think is important. We need to think about these things going forwards. Are we going to be meeting the requirements for equitable online assessment for all students? What do I mean by that, equitable online assessment? Everyone is going to have to take the test online. That's a fact. That's the story the state's telling us. Is it equitable that there are students in districts who, from the time they're in kindergarten, are given a one-to-one device by the district, and chances are they have a couple devices at home as well? The point is, our job as a public school is to prepare our students. We need to make sure that we're making every investment we possibly can in our students' future and ensuring that they have this equitable online access that the students they're competing against have. Another challenge, the funding to support curricular resources at all levels. And that's really important because you can see, we've been talking about, there's this challenging new assessment. It's looking at different standards, more rigorous standards. Are we going to be able to support the resources at all the different levels to make sure that they can succeed? We did a great job on MCAS. We've been praised, nationally in how we did defining the demographic, all that stuff with MCAS. We're pretty good at MCAS. This is MCAS 2.0. It's a different test. The appropriate class size and student-teacher ratios, they are growing, and that's just, you can't deny it, you can't finesse it. The bottom line is, when you walk around, the superintendent has us, visiting schools, doing walkthroughs, and one of the things we all are doing is we're all counting heads in the classrooms. And when you see 27, 28, 29 kids in really young elementary grades, and you don't see another adult in the class. I used to be a teacher. I taught 35 high school kids. I don't know how these people, I really don't know how they can handle, first graders, second graders. It's really something.
Well, it's not a case of just handling it. It's a case of the impact down the line. So when you have a child in kindergarten and you've got a class of 27 or 28 and we don't have a teacher aide, a paraprofessional supporting that class, all the time as we had previously, and that, of course, was a grant from the state where we had a paraprofessional in every one of our kindergarten classes, and the classes probably were maybe 23 or 24. We haven't seen that in 3 or 4 years. So those youngsters, when this originally happened, and we have been cutting positions since, I want to remind everybody, May of 2014, you are, regardless of the testing, you are seeing the impact. And when you heard me talk earlier this evening about now is the time for us, again, we have challenges. We need to be looking at what those challenges are, whether they're curriculum, whether they're support in the classroom. And I'm confident that we will do that. But we can't keep relying on what happened in the past. The future are for these students that are kindergarten, first to second grade, that are going to have to pass an online MCAS test and need to have those tools. When we finish here, I will talk about and just give you some very quick updates, because there are some things happening with our advocacy now that we're, again, finished our elections, and we can kind of move on to other things that we have been trying to focus on. But make no mistake about it, when you look at, and the last thing here is stabilizing the district, it is not okay that last year, and this is, I'm not blaming a contract, this is just the reality, when you give out pink slips to not only the numbers of teachers, remember how many teachers did not come back throughout our district. And this is not a district, I want to remind everybody, that is losing students. So when I have a 5th grade teacher all of a sudden teaching 2nd grade, or a 2nd grade teacher in another school because that was the opening teaching another grade, it's very difficult to stabilize a district. So this is what our goal is to, when we finish with this year, and I know you were adamant about looking at the budget now, not come February, not come March. That'll be something that Aldo Petronio and I are not only putting together, even Monday night when I do talk to the city council, we'll already start, and unfortunately it's projections. There are so many things that are still happening, but they have to understand the impact that it is having on our students. And somebody needs to stand up and tell our city that Meeting Foundation, and even looking at $1 million over foundation when the budget is a $220 million budget. And let's not forget that previously Meeting Foundation was $167 million a year ago, and this year it's $161. How can we continue to run a district and provide our students, every one of them, from the student that's talented and gifted, to the special education student, to the student that's in a class of close to 30 youngsters? So that is our challenge, and I know the hard fight that we're making, but I think we need to be clear to everybody every time we talk that it is having an impact on our children.
So, with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain any of them.
I just have a question. Do we know if our comparables did online or written or both?
Both.
They did both?
But the majority of districts around the state, 4th and 8th grade did online. That's the majority. But we got a waiver. Boston had some schools doing it, some schools not doing it. So different schools have been doing different things.
But we were allowed to put in, and we really kind of went back and forth, and we had conversation, just looking even at the 8th grade. It didn't make any sense at this point not to have every one of those 8th grade, regardless of what a score is going to be. They needed to take that test online to at least have an idea of what was coming in 2 years for them. You know, to me, it would have been irresponsible, again, for us not to provide them with that opportunity. And that was a decision that we've made. And as Dr. Cancel said, we have been progressive every step of the way. When there were opportunities and there were districts pulling back and doing paper and pencil, we were pushing forward with what we thought was a strategic plan. And last year, the state stepped in and said every district, we weren't prepared to have every district with our 8th graders all taking online. But that to me, it isn't about a score, it's about the right decision, but clearly we're seeing impacts.
I think, you know, the numbers are not terrible, not great. And I was thinking back to, you know, we've had a school that maybe was consistent and then one year, you know, had a drop, but then the next year came back up. And I think in 15, the Huntington may have been one of those schools that had a drop and then the next year did better. And we were in a extended learning time grant review with DESE, and they kind of asked about that. And you know, it wasn't time to have a knee-jerk reaction, but what they did do is look at, you know, why do they think it happened? What were they going to do to better prepare? How are they, you know, they had a plan. And so I guess what I would like to see is some follow-up. Okay, these are the numbers. Let's look at, do some analysis of why we think the numbers are what they are and how we can, you know, show some improvement and what's the plan to go forward and do better. You know, so I think it'd be good if maybe some follow-up on that at some future point.
Yeah, that was our discussion today. You know, obviously, we're starting to, I know Dr. Cancel and June Saber-McGuire presented to the principals and made sure that they were able to see not only their schools, but to look at across, you know, many of the districts, the comparable districts. So our plan, and as I thought, you know, our December meeting is probably not going to be the time to start. But I think come the first of the year is to continually have curriculum presentations to you about what we're doing at every one of the grade levels. You know, we've put into place Imagine Learning throughout the district. We actually came up with a plan this year using some of our extended day money for after school, and that license allows you to use it during the school day. We were able to bring Playworks in, which is really about social and emotional learning and support. We brought Foundations in, which is a phonics program for our youngest students. You heard me talk about the Reach Reading program, which, again, you go back to June Saber-McGuire 3 years ago, you know, begging Aldo for every penny she could, because we saw the results in other districts, and Lynn was one of them, that had implemented K-5 Reach Reading program, especially for English language learners, SPED students. There's a lot of language development in there, and we were unable to do that. So we've brought it a grade level at a time, and we're up to grade 2 at this point. So we will continue to add, but to our detriment, not to be able to bring in a reading program that we're supporting throughout the district. We're looking at, when you talk about the math scores at the high school, we've been back and forth on a textbook that a couple of years ago we purchased, then didn't have funding to purchase additional textbook. So we're looking at, again, math from the middle school to the high school and try to identify those areas. Sometimes our hands are tied when you talk about, and I'll remind you about the teacher with 35 youngsters in a classroom that I visited up the high school, an excellent teacher. And when I questioned about the class, her concern was, she would take 50 students, but she said to me, I cannot get to every student the way I could previously. I'm trying, but I can't give them that individual attention. So these are the things that we, in our budget, I guess, and a priority has always been looking at class size. And in the very end, it's just, being able to handle the magnitude. You know what's coming before you. We need more adjustment counselors. We need paraprofessionals in the schools. And all of these things are things that they're not luxuries. This is how we were able to function and to support our students, and that's when you saw, and a lot of it came, for instance, even when I mentioned the kindergarten. We had a grant that came, it was called class size reduction. But what it allowed us to do was to have smaller kindergarten classes and have a para in every one of our kindergartens throughout our district, our full-day kindergartens. 2 years ago, the grant was gone partway through the year with 9 C cuts. Those are things, again, that our legislators need to say. It's not okay for urban students. And here's why I talk about, if you recall last year, in the budget, it was an additional $30 for every student across the state. That $30 in Wellesley, I'm not sure what that meant for them. But it sure as heck, had you taken that money and supported urban districts with all of that money, would have made a difference for those 29 kids that we might have been able to put a para in that classroom. So these are the kinds of, when you heard me talk earlier, those are the tough decisions that has to be our collective voice. It has to be the voices of our parents. We have to be telling our elected officials from a state senator to state representatives, because that to me was not okay last year. That, again, I understand that everybody gets a little bit of the pie and I guess everybody's happy politically. But is that the right thing to do for kids? So, we'll continue our advocacy. Again, I will talk in a few minutes to finish up, some of the things that are happening, because that has been our goal for this year, is to continue to support our youngsters. So there's no excuses. We look at the challenges, but we need to dissect and find out where we can basically make improvements, for our students as they progress along this path.
So would it be a reasonable expectation maybe for our, I assume we'll have a retreat in the beginning of the year, January sometime, seems to, we typically, would that be a reasonable time frame to expect to see something, some sort of a plan, or is that a little
Well,
too
we
soon?
already, I don't think it's soon at all. We would
Okay.
be ready in December if you wanted. I just felt with the December meetings, we're usually
Well, we're going to start
cutting the
diving
meeting
into the
short.
budget.
We have
and-
the Pops
yeah.
concert we're trying to get to.
Right.
So we had talked today about coming in right at the beginning of the year and talking all about continue to keep the focus on, and it's not the testing, but to continue to keep the focus on the curriculum and the support for the
Right.
classrooms.
There is something that I'm very interested in. Other people may not be quite as interested, but the superintendent in June asked me to put together an assessment review committee, because if we have this new test, we have to make sure our assessments are lined up with the new test. Our assessments were lined up with the old frameworks and the old MCAS. So that's what we're doing. So we have representation at, we have English, math, science at the elementary, at the middle school level, and that's what we're doing. And we also want to use our tools that we have in the district that we've invested in more effectively. So that's the focus of our assessment committee, and it's a really great group, and I think that that's the sort of work that you're going to be seeing going on across the Commonwealth. And the nice thing is when you go, you talk to your friends in Boston, you talk to your friends in Lowell, you talk to your friends in Lynn, you kind of share the insights that you reach, and that's how we all got better back in the 90s when MCAS first came out, and that's what we're going to be doing again. And so that's why I'm confident that you will see, despite the really stiff headwinds that we face economically, I think you are going to see improvement just as we get, we ratchet up our game and get a little better.
So again, when you're talking about those assessments, whether they're what we call STAR assessments, and they align with what the teachers are teaching. So as a teacher is teaching a unit or a lesson, whether it be math, English language arts, they're able to see how their class is progressing. And that usually aligns with what your expectation would be when they finish and take the test in the springtime. So it should give you an idea of those students that are struggling, or those classes that are struggling, those teachers that are doing an excellent job in moving the needle with student growth.
I don't know, it was 16 minutes when I did it on my own.
Is that it?
That's it.
I know, I get. That's the last slide.
I had a joke, but we don't have enough time for it. All right, we're done. Thank you.
Actually have, are we going to stay in the ambiance of darkness? What's that?
We're up 1-0.
Okay, well, okay, then let me get you out of here. So again, we talked about that tonight. I will talk to you next week about the advocacy happening, but while I have people here on the 21st before the school committee meeting, we do have an opportunity for parents that are out there that are interested in looking at the plaintiff that we're looking to name in our equity and education lawsuit. We have the lawyer coming at 6 o'clock, same time, same channel, right here at the Arnone School. The attorney will be here afterwards to talk to us about the filing of the equity and education lawsuit, some of the things that we've actually been able to do at this point. I had an opportunity to talk to MASC at your conference last week. Aldo was able to present about the economically disadvantaged, did an excellent job. And at the same time, your Mass Association for School Committees passed a resolve to support. They're not sure where this equity and education lawsuit is coming from, but their resolve was to support a district or districts that are going forward with this. Number two, also speaking at the urban superintendent meeting this Friday, the 17th, and there will be a discussion about us going forward and having other districts coming on board with us. Also, we are going to be looking at a Proposition 2.5, whether it's override, whether it's debt exclusion, whether it's looking to support our students, and this to me needs to be a community outreach effort. It isn't just elected officials that should be serving on this, but if we're going to have any impact, whether it's at a voting booth or whether it's making sure that our budget represents what our families want for our students, then we need to start putting a group together, not just us sitting and trying to manage a very, very difficult budget. So Richard Bath came before you previously. Ozzie Jordan told me this evening he was willing to start to build a community coalition to support some of the things that we need. The parent portal, and like I said, I'll go over this on Tuesday night. I've got a number of other things in here, but we are looking under Infinite Campus to advance the parent portal to the middle schools. You have middle school parent teacher conferences coming up. There are opportunities for parents to sign up. So similar to the high school, they will have an opportunity. And we talked about the high school, and many parents are going in under the student, password, et cetera. But we're going to have to make an effort that it isn't just students at the high school, it is a parent portal. So a separate parent sign-in and login so that you can see your students' attendance and discipline and grading, et cetera. Eventually, we'll get down to the middle school level, but that is moving forward quickly, and I'm pleased.
And those of us that have multiple students in the district, it'd be good to have that parent log in too, because we can see each child instead of just logging in for each child.
Right. So like I said, I'm not going to hold you tonight on that. I also want to talk about the inclement weather with a 1-hour delay, a 90-minute delay, and a 2-hour delay. You saw what happened when we had the bad storm. Somehow we got that day in, and we're talking about the reverse half day. So we are getting letters out to our parents in the district to go over, and we're putting all of the times in. We have so many different schools that have so many different times because of extended learning time. It isn't as simple as the high school, the middle school, the elementary. So that is going out to remind them where they can get information, to update their information. Some parents were claiming they didn't receive phone calls. That's all about the number that we have in the system. And hopefully this parent portal will help us to also get updated information from our parents. And the last thing is, and I'll talk about it on Tuesday, is the code of conduct. There is a parent questionnaire that has been approved that'll be going out with everything from the dress code to cell phones and starting to get some parent input for a forum that's going to be happening in January. So all of that is happening. And that's my report for tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything with regard to unfinished business?
You've got a policy manual review subcommittee on the 28th. I know that's looking at the next section of our policy manual. I believe it's financial services. And we'll continue to go through the policy manual. Our hope, again, is that by the time we get into the summer, we've reviewed the whole policy.
Okay. New business? No? No need for, did someone, yes, Joy?
Quick question, as far as Monday the 20th, if we want to attend City Hall, but I also see that there's an event going on at BHS for the National Honor Society.
I know.
So do we have a ballpark time as
That's
to?
from 5 to 7.
Okay, but
No, it is.
Usually-
You're absolutely right. It is a conflict. At this point, I'm going to try to juggle between the two.
okay,
We'll get more information for you and have it in your packet. I wonder if they will commit to have us go first.
okay.
But 7 o'clock, I think the National Honor Society
Five to
is.
seven.
It's 5 to 7,
right,
but
so-
usually doesn't council start at 7?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, but we're probably fine because we'll probably get there, we'll be called late anyway, but maybe we can let them know the time that we'll be there.
Okay.
And congratulations to all those people that are being inducted into your National Honor Society at Brockton High School.
Okay, anyone else? No? Nothing for executive session this evening, so can we entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Great.
Please go cheer on our soccer students.
It's halftime.